Hey Flashaholics, this video will cover Manker's MK41 HI and HD versions. This is the control scene. The street is about 3 car width, and I'm going to use a control light, Manker's U21 first. That's on turbo, full blast. There's a fire hydrant with that red dot there out about, I'm guessing it's about 400 feet out. And color temperature is reasonably accurate compared to what I'm seeing in real life. Likewise, for the light output, it's reasonably accurate to what I'm seeing in real life. So first up, we're going to have Manker's HD. To keep things fair, because I don't have two sets of 14500 IMRs, I'm running both of the MK41s on GP Recycos, and then for a comparison shot, I'm using the Jetbeam SRA40 running on Eneloops. So here you can see the HD is definitely higher output. Very nice floody wide beam. Now we have Manker's MK41 HI. And therein lies the difference. The HI definitely has better throw, which you'll see in the measurement section much later, but less output. See that tighter hotspot there? Now I'm actually going to shine them side by side. So here you can see definitely on the right side is the HI version, much more intense hotspot, whereas the HD has a broader hotspot. First the HD, and now the HI. HI's hotspot on that tree there, and now the HD's. And again, side by side for comparison. Then we have the Jetbeam SRA40 for comparison, because this is an older 4AA light, but it has one of the best throws out of the ones in my collection. The tight hotspot is comparable, but just not quite as tight as the MK41 HI. And as mentioned, overall the tint of all of these lights so far has been pretty close to what I'm seeing in real life. Here's another comparison, this time with some shrubbery in the scene. As you can see, it's still pretty cold out here in the north, but I'm actually going to go through all the levels. So this is on low. It's pretty close to what I'm seeing in real life. Yes, that's one of those solar power lights out there, and it is kind of drowning out the low mode, which is again fairly accurate. I'm not going to go into turbo because it's nighttime. I don't want my neighbors calling the cops, but okay, this is a reasonably comfortable level. And here's the HI by comparison again. As you can see, much tighter hotspot and less overall output. Now side by side. Tint-wise, they're pretty close to what I'm seeing in real life. What I'm seeing is that the HD has a slight greenish yellowish hue to it versus almost a pure white of the HI. So here's the HD. And here's the HI. I'm going to flip-flop them around. Should be obvious which one's which. HI is on the top right now. Side by side on the shrubbery, HD on the left, HI on the right, and swapped. So the MK41 arrives in this cardboard box with an outer sleeve here that bears nothing but picture and company information. The box contains less foam than usual because it does come with this nice holster here. It's got a Velcro strap on the back here. Within the accessory bag was a wrist strap, a spare O-ring, and the tripod mount that was not pre-installed. So Manker has been fleshing out their lineup, and the latest to join their group of flashlights is the MK41. It comes in two flavors. The one in my hand is the HD version, and the HI is the D-dome version. More throw, but less lumens overall. So therein, you can kind of see the differences between the two. On the left is the HI, that's D-domed, and on my right is the HD one. For the sake of time, the rest of the review, I'm just going to use the HD version. Both feature a double-sided AR-coated lens, as you can see there. There's this bezel that holds down the reflector. Well, technically not really, because once you take the head apart, the bezel, that reflector is actually screwed on. There's an inner thread on the inside of the head here, which I'll cover later. But anyway, so you have the bezel, you have the reflector that actually screws down. There's only minor thermal paste underneath there, so it is necessary that that reflector holds it down to press on the PCB to hold onto the shelf for heat dissipation. There's a black centering disc. Now the reflector, there's some plane in it to help center, so one must use caution when putting back on that reflector. They continue to use the side switch with the now familiar Quinlan logo on it, stainless steel ring around it. You also have these heat fins around both sides of the throat. I mean, the overall design is almost like you took a U11, fattened it up, and it's, like I said, it's just about identical. You've got these heat fins here, same design motif, but just overall in a fatter config. On the opposite end of the side switch, you have the tripod mounting hole there. It doesn't come pre-installed. I suppose if you don't use it, you could just leave it off. You save yourself like, what, 1 gram, 2 grams of weight there. But if you do use it, just simply take it, screw it on. The only thing though is that even though fully mounted, it juts out a little bit. I don't know if that was intentional or if they simply took the ring from the MK35 and shipped that one out first. I'll get in contact with Manker about that, but these are early production test samples. I don't really anticipate a major difference between these and finalized production versions, so I mean, ultimately not a big deal. That could actually help with certain tripod mounts by being extended a little to give you additional clearance. Not that this head juts out, but as mentioned, I'll get to the bottom of that and post updates in my comments. Now, in the body of the light itself, there's the engraving here on this side as well as this side. The other two are plain. This texture is rather mild, but it does help with the grip, especially on the tail cap side. I had actually gotten the HI version first because that was a very early test sample. That one didn't come greased at all, but on this version it came amply greased, since this was actually a problem that I had noted on the MK35, in that this PCB created noise, but now it's very nice and smooth. The battery config is just about identical to the MK35. It runs 4 cells in series, and as far as I know, it's the first light that can actually accept 4 14500 cells in addition to regular nickel metal hydride cells. Peering into the tube there, you can see there are positive anode tips, so that way you could use flat top cells as well. So case in point, I picked up these 14500 cells from Melton Electronics. They're pretty good. They tested very well in HKJ's review. And the reason why I picked the flat tops versus the button top, this one I actually got to test out the T01. It's a non-protected IMR cell, and it does fit and run on the T01, so I'm glad to see that this works nicely for those of you who have been hunting for good cells for the T01. Now back to this. The reason why I picked the flat top is because in general, especially dealing with high currents, in watching a bunch of HKJ's reviews, the flat top cells tend to test a little better because due to, less resistance, I guess, that the button top adds. So especially in a high draw light or IMR, every little bit counts, so thus I elected to get these. But it does work on a variety of cells. Again, I just don't use alkalines, they leak, so don't bother with those. But in my runtime testing later, you'll see I did test Eneloops, Eneloop Pros, and those Windy Fire IMRs. These prongs here are not part of the circuit. They basically help you to align the PCB board. You just simply input it into one of these holes, match the other side, so thus the rotating PCB can go perfectly aligned for the cells. The tail end is perfectly flat, thus allowing for perfect tail standing, reasonably stable. And there is this little hole here for the wrist strap. The side is nicely rounded off, so it's not sharp, thus creating any problems. And that pretty much covers off the features of these lights. So size-wise, you can see that it is the most stout out of all of the 4AA lights that I have. Not quite as slim in diameter as the D40A, but definitely the shortest overall. I threw in the TN36UT for good measure, just so you could get a good sense of the size versus a true soup can size light. Names are all there, but if you have any questions, pop in a comment. And here's a head-on shot, so that way you could get a sense of the depth of the reflector as well as the overall diameter. In general, the MK41 is nearly identical to the TN4A. The D40A has a slightly smaller diameter reflector, but quite a bit deeper, and of course the SRA40 with the largest and deepest reflector, thus giving it a pretty good throw even though using an older generation emitter. The UI of the MK35 is just about identical to the MK41. So again, there are two groups. On the left-hand side are 4 fixed output levels, and on the right-hand side, there is 1 fixed output level, which is the turbo, and then these blinky modes, and then last but not least, a dragon breath. So from an off state, a quick press will enter moonlight mode, and each successive press will enter low, medium, and high, and then from high, it will actually cycle back down to medium, low, and then moonlight, and then back to low, medium, high ad nauseum. Now, from any of these output levels, a long press to off will memorize that output level, so that way when you long press from off, it will immediately enter the last memorized mode. At any point in time with the light on or off, 2 quick presses will immediately enter turbo mode, and each successive press after that would go to strobe, SOS, beacon, and then dragon breath, and then finally from dragon breath, a quick press will enter back into moonlight mode again. Shutting off the light from here would never memorize any of these modes. The LEDs behind the side switch also gives you an indication of the battery level. So blue is more than 75, purple is 50, and red is less than 20%. I cover that much later on after the runtime and output. There is also an electronic lockout feature, which I cover in a second. And then last but not least, there's an engineering mode which allows you to program a different output level for the moonlight as well as the turbo modes. I'll get into that in a dedicated video that will cover both the MK41 and MK35 in the future. So let's get into the actual demonstration now. I've dimmed the lights to demonstrate the UI and output levels. The exposure is fixed currently from off A quick press will immediately enter the lowest mode. It goes from low to medium 1, medium 2, then to high. And then from high, it actually steps back down to medium 2, medium 1, and back to low. At any point, 2 quick presses will immediately engage the turbo mode. And then from there, each successive press will cycle through the secondary modes. So next one being a fixed rate strobe, an SOS mode, a beacon mode, and last but not least, what they call the breathe flash, which is only through this button. The LED emitter is not activated at this point. And then from here, another press will re-engage the lowest mode. There is memory, so let's just say if I enter medium 2, I long press, which is at least a half a second, to shut off the light. It will memorize this mode so that the next time I also long press, it will activate the last memorized mode. So as with the MK35, there is an electronic lockout feature, and how that's accessed is 1, 2, and 3 quick presses in succession. So with the light on or off, 1, 2, 3. And there you can see, it gives this brief flash. The LED emitter is not activated at this point, and it is just pretty much locked out. So even if I press and hold, it will not engage the light. If I keep pressing, as you can see, it is electronically locked out. To disengage it, it's the same sequence. 1, 2, 3. And there you can see, I pressed it too many times, so thereby went to another mode, but thereby it's now disengaged. Press it to shut off, press again, cycle through ad nauseum. So overall, it's a little bit tricky to get right, but once you memorize it, it should be pretty straightforward. The only caveat is, again, the slightly stiffer feedback of this switch. Here's a quick comparison between the two in terms of the beam width. So overall, I would say the HI has a roughly total 90-degree beam angle with the center hotspot at roughly about 10 degrees. This is locked exposure on high, and the tint is very close to what I'm seeing in real life. And here's the HD version. As you can see, the total beam width is actually about the same, maybe a teensy like 1 or 2 degrees wider, but it's really the hotspot here. As you can see there, it's almost, I would say, what is that, roughly 30 degrees wide versus the 10-degree narrow beam of the HI version. First up, we have Manker's MK41. This is running on 4 Windy Fire IMR's 14500 cells. Now we have Jetbeam's SRA40. Now we have ThruNite's TN4A. Now we have Sunwayman D40A. Here's Manker's MK41 on 4 Eneloop Pros. Now we get to Manker's MK41 HD. And now the MK41 HD with Eneloop XX. In terms of the throw summary, as usual, on the left-hand side here is what the manufacturer stated specs and the battery type that I used. And then on the right-hand side here is what I measured. Let's take it from the top from the best. Obviously, with a new HID domed emitter and just a sheer raw output on 14500 cells, the MK41 HI takes home the crown at 520 meter beam distance. So Manker quoted 43.4 for Eneloop's 67.5 with the lithium ions or 14500 cells. I'm using 4 Windy Fire IMRs and pretty much just came in dead on with what they stated. Now for the HD on Eneloop XX, I actually came in slightly lower, but on the IMRs, we came in a little bit higher. So those are the measurements over here for the HD. The IMR bested it by about 40 meters, was slightly behind by about 15 meters or so for the Eneloops. The next best thrower after these pair of Mankers would be the Jetbeam SRA40, and this is, even though it's an older light, pumping out only, just a tick under 1,000 lumens, but it has the absolute deepest reflector, also slightly larger in diameter, but that deeper reflector really helps it eke out a benefit in the throw. Likewise for the Sunwayman D40A, not as deep as the Jetbeam SRA40, plus not to mention it's also slightly orange peel reflector, but still fairly decent. And then last but not least comes in the TN4A. It has a shallow reflector just like on the Manker MK41s, and I only measured 341 meter beam distance, but still slightly better than what ThruNite had claimed. So be sure to check out the size comparo section. I should have pictures so you could see just how deep each of these reflectors are as well as the diameter. In the interest of time, I only did the runtime on turbo mode. For the HI version, it's using Windy Fire IMRs, the Eneloop Pros, and the Eneloop. So let's start off with Windy Fires. As you can see here, there's initial step down. It doesn't really maintain turbo for a long time, right? For roughly about 5 minutes before it does a complete step down to roughly a tick over 600 lumens, then does a gradual decline through the life of the rest of the batteries. Unfortunately, one of those cells was bad, but it doesn't really impact the beginning of the run, but rather the tail end of the run. So I contacted Melton Electronics. They sent another cell, but unfortunately that replacement cell suffered the same fate, which I'll show you in the second run later. But total runtime achieved, according to NCFR1 standards, 127 minutes. And the lumens recorded at 30 seconds was 1410, with the average of this total run roughly about 470 lumens. The temperature, it didn't really get meaningfully hot at all, regardless of the cell used. And on the HI version, at least, not bad at all. Now for the Eneloop Pros, it does pretty much follow the same standard, obviously just at a lower output. Total runtime was 143 minutes, measured at 30 seconds, the lumens was 1200, and then the total average for that run was about 519, so it's nearly identical to the standard Eneloops just for extended period of time. This bouncing up and down that you see here is actually a flashing, which I'll show you in a second. It's the low voltage warning kicking in. Last but not least, the Eneloop, same thing. It's just a shorter version of the Eneloop run. So that sums up the HI version. Now for the HD version, this is where it gets a little interesting. So this was running on that first bad cell, so that's why you see one set here. This one is actually the darker run back here, in which case I obtained about 94 minutes. But like I said, the replacement cell was also bad. So 3 cells were ending at 3 volts, and I'm talking about at the end of this very long extended run because I kind of left and thereby 3 of those cells were at 3 volts, whereas one was all the way down to 1.37. So I'm going to need another replacement. But bottom line is that for those 2 runs, roughly about over 94 minutes, the lumens measure was 2180 at 30 seconds, and the total average for that run was roughly close to 700. Now, on the first run, it did get above 100F, but still, that's not too bad at all. And this is with a mild fan blowing. I conduct all of my runtime testing with a small USB fan blowing a very mild breeze. The Eneloop runs are where it gets a little interesting because on the Pro, as you can see here, it actually starts increasing. This does it for almost like first roughly almost 5 minutes, where it'll suddenly shoot up to 1700 lumens before doing a step down and then running nearly perfectly regulated before it can no longer maintain the current, and then a second step down. Then on the HD version, it will completely cut out. It will not give you the low voltage warning whatsoever. So for that one, I got 93 minutes, and the lumens measured, this one's actually at 2 minutes because of that continual increase, was 1590, and the total average for that run was about roughly 867. Now the standard Eneloop, it follows roughly the same pattern. It'll shoot up a little bit, maintain almost a nearly perfectly regulated run, then it'll do a step down, but a lower level than the Eneloop Pros, I assume because it can't maintain the same kind of current. And also because it is running lower, it runs it for a longer period of time before it does a second step down, which is a little bit lower than the Eneloop Pros, and then finally cutting off completely. Runtime total there was 108 minutes. Lumens measure was 1480, I think also roughly close to 2 minutes, and the total average for that run was 649. So the temperature on the Eneloops wasn't too bad. With the windy fires, it was a little bit higher, but like I said, for both lights, not too bad at all. Now, this run, sorry, I didn't mention it earlier, but on the windy fire over here towards this tail end, the light does not completely cut out. Over here was still roughly below 1 lumens, I would say roughly about half lumens. But bottom line, I would say for short bursts, go with the 14500 cells because at least you'll get the higher output. I would say best bang for the buck, probably stick with Eneloop Pros or equivalents. So this is a little bit different than their standard way of showing low voltage. In this case, the MK41 will flash both the side switch and the emitter itself to indicate that the battery is now low. The side switch is also flashing a purplish red, as you can see there. As an initial summary, I would say that there's a lot going for both of these lights. Which one you pick is totally a matter of preference about the beam style. So I would say that when I first started off in flashoholism, I really liked throwers. I mean, to me, a flood meant something that happened to your basement when your sump broke out, but I very rarely purchased any flooding lights. Pretty much my whole string, maybe I would say the first few years, I've invested in nothing but flooders. However, though, over time, and especially as I started to use the lights more indoors, I come to really appreciate a good, smooth, wide, floody beam. So thus, I would say that at this stage of my flashoholism, yes, I still enjoy myself a great thrower like the recent MK35, but it's really the HD that's won me over, especially with the sheer output as well as the overall floodier beam profile, not to mention the larger hotspot. It just makes it a lot easier to navigate at night. I also like the fact that you could program that low mode to something that's so low that here I got it up front right against the lens. It's not in focus, but you can see that it's barely on. And I can't even measure that on my PVC LMD. It gives you a good range to program from the low mode. Also, the turbo mode is programmable as well. Again, I'll get to that in a future dedicated engineering mode for both this and the MK35. But just to wrap it off, the fit and finish, what can I say? Like I said, by this point, they've pretty much got the machine down. There's absolutely no qualms with the fit and finish, the anodization. All of the edges are nicely deburred. There is absolutely no sharpness whatsoever. The engraving is all perfect. There's no blotchiness on it at all. If I had to nitpick, and of course, I don't know if this was intentional or not, it's just that the tripod mount sits not flush with the light. But of course, that could have been intentional, so I'll find out and update in my comment section. But the form factor and the fact that it could use regular AA's, this is one additional light that I could now recommend. And I believe at the current suggested MSRP of $55.95, it prices quite competitively with the other 4 AA lights out there. I don't know every single one out there. I haven't been really keeping tabs on them, but it's a light that I could safely recommend to any newbie looking for a good flashlight because, like I said, it could run on a whole bunch of chemistries from nickel metal hydrides to a added boost of the 14500s. It runs relatively cool. It won't really scald one's hand. So I feel reasonably safe recommending this light. Now, if there was one nitpick that I would have, it would remain that this switch is a little bit stiffer than what I'm accustomed to. It's maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, but just that feel, while it does have a very nice tactile feedback, as you could hear there, the nice detent and clicks there, but I just feel that maybe for an elderly person or one who has wrist or hand ailments, that this may be potentially problematic. The rebound strength is definitely a lot firmer than what I'm accustomed to. Aside from that, there's really not much I could pick on with regards to cons of this light. It comes with a nice holster. It's got a Velcro quick release so that you can strap it onto your belt. Permanent nylon D-loop in case you want to hang it off of something. Comes with that wrist strap, which again, like the MK35, is slightly on the small side, but for this size of light, it works well. The UI, of course, that's a very subjective and personal thing. I personally do like it. And don't want to be a dead horse here, but like I said, with the caveat that the switch may make it a little more difficult to operate than normal. As I had highlighted in the MK35 review, with the addition of the tripod mount and you slap on one of these flash diffusers, it adds a lot of great versatility to the use of this light. So be it supplementary lighting or use for photography, again, it just gives you added versatility. Of course, the white balance is a little bit off there, but you get the idea of that nice diffuse lighting that you could apply for photography or whatever purposes. Aside from the switch, the other thing that I would like to see is if they can possibly reprogram the light to a different output level so that they could completely get rid of the step down, perhaps sacrifice some overall lumens, maybe bump it down, like say the HD version, instead of 2000 lumens, maybe keep it at 1800 lumens or even 1700 so that it doesn't run as hot because of the voltage at 16.8 volts is actually bucking during that time. So I feel that they could probably potentially drive it a little bit harder without the worry of excessive heat. Of course, again, I'm not the manufacturer, right? The manufacturer has the worries of warranty repairs, etc., etc. They're a company that's overseas in China without any established shops in the US, so that has to be taken into consideration as well. So I could totally understand why many manufacturers go the route of a step down. However, though, perhaps they could have an enthusiast version with limited warranty, and obviously buyers would understand that going into it. So just some of the stuff that I'm going to feedback to Manker. But aside from that, again, this is a light that you could safely recommend to any new person who's not familiar at all with flashlights because of the fact that you could use standard nickel metal hydrides. And for enthusiasts like us, you could also have the added bonus of bumped up output with the 14500 cells. However, as with the runtime that you saw, your best bang for the buck would probably be a good set of Eneloop Pros or its equivalent. I think Amazon Basics have their copy of those as well. But bottom line, it's great light that's very competitively priced and performs, pretty well as compared to its peers, as you saw in the numbers, the runtime, the throw summaries. So great job, Banker. Let's see about those suggestions, perhaps in a future revision or iteration of this light. As part of FTC disclosure, both the HI and HD versions of the MK41 were provided by Manker for review. Thanks again for watching.